All right. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our InfoSec seminar organized by the Information System Security Assurance Management Department at Faculty of Management in Q. Today, Dr. Aslam is away on a conference, so I will be hosting this seminar with Sean Thompson. So we'll begin our November InfoSec seminar by acknowledging that although this seminar is being held virtually, Concordia University of Edmonton is located on Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous people, including Cree, Saltex, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakotas, Sioux people. We respect and acknowledge this. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Sharif Albert, the Interim Dean of Management, Dr. Andreas Gulvers, Deputy Provost, who have joined us today for this great InfoSec talk. Today, we are pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Calvin Engen, to give us an interesting talk about the seduction of cyber tools and AI. Are your defense armed or it's just for show? So Calvin Onion is CTO of S12.net and holder of CISSP certification, a leading managed security service provider. Calvin brings a wealth of experience and insight into the everlasting landscape of cybersecurity. With over 18 years at F12, Calvin oversees not only internal security and compliance, but also spearheads the company's research, development, and client facing security teams. Calvin's commitment to excellence has played an integral role in shaping F12's comprehensive suite of services, which include boutique private cloud solutions, cybersecurity measures, and hardware as a service. Having climbed the ranks from his initial role to Director of IT in 2012 and eventually CTO in 2019, Kelvin's innovation thinking and leadership skills have set the standards in the industry. He serves as the only Canadian member of the WatchGuard Advisory Council and Blackpoint Cyber Advisory Council and collaborates with Canada Chamber of Commerce on their Cyber Right Now initiative aimed at elevating cybersecurity measures and advocacy across Canadian businesses. Thanks, Calvin, for being with us today and sharing your experience with our audience. Just two quick notes for all of us. During the presentation, microphones will be turned off to avoid interrupting the speaker. At the end, we'll have 10 to 15 minutes for questions, and microphones will be turned back on. Please limit yourself to one question to give opportunity to other participants to ask. If we'll have enough time, feel free to ask your questions again. And at the end, I'll share the registration and feedback form with you. Please make sure to provide your name, email address, and a brief feedback so we can send you a certification of attendance. Thank you. And now I'll give this to Calvin.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that warm welcome. When I always hear it told back to me, all the things that we've accomplished as an organization, I'm always humbled. But hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. As mentioned, I'm CTO and managing partner for F12, one of Canada's leading managed service providers, serving specifically the small to medium enterprise market. And we provide support for around 50,000 users across 900 unique companies with the help of our 300 employees. And in my role, I'm focused on three key areas: keeping our clients' data safe and secure, developing innovative cybersecurity programs and services, and advocating for cyber awareness, not just within F12, but across Canada. I'm especially passionate about supporting our small to medium enterprises who often face unique challenges when it comes to cybersecurity, partly due to limited resources and the high vulnerability to evolving threats. But beyond my work at F12, as indicated, I work on a number of different federal government initiatives, like the Cyber Right Now initiative, as spoken about, and a different level of, or a number of different advisory groups. But the importance there is about elevating our standards for cybersecurity services. Often, we were just chatting even before we got started around the need to continue to educate business leaders and IT individuals on the requirements that are needed into today's threat landscape. And so my aim through doing all of this is to really make an impact at the national level, make Canada one of the premier cybersecurity providers in on the planet, effectively. So ensuring that our cybersecurity practices keep up to pace with the threat landscape that's always changing. So to all the students and alumni here today, know that cybersecurity itself needs passionate, driven individuals like yourselves. And I'm here to share some insights from my own journey, lessons learned, and hopefully some inspiration as you continue to build your skills and careers in cybersecurity. So with that, I'd like to kick us off um, with a story. A vulnerable one for me, actually. It was 4 years ago, so I was a year into me becoming the executive as the chief technology officer, and I would say that one of the things that I had was a bit of an arrogance. That was getting the better of me. I thought we had a robust cybersecurity practice. We were doing all the right things for cybersecurity. We had asset validation, vulnerability management, perimeter defense, a robust cybersecurity training platform for our employees. We were even doing penetration testing. And then with all of those things, we were SOC 2 Type 2 attested, where everything that we had in place was actually happening and validated by a third party. So the fact was is that we were using some of the best tools in the marketplace at the time. Um, those that were in Gartner's Magic Quadrant, or Forrester's Wave, like the best of the best, the one that really kind of spoke to um, some of the leaders of the pack. And so around this time, 4 years ago, we were just going through a ownership change in terms of our private equity firm. And so one of their requirements as part of their due diligence was to bring in their own third party to come and do a penetration test against F12 systems. They wanted to make sure that it was safe, actually safe and secure, not just trusting my word for it. And so they went through that. And so as they started to go through it, I said, it's not necessary. I was kind of puffing out my chest a little bit. I'm like, we really are doing all the right things. And they're like, this is just a requirement. You have to go through it. No problem. And I welcomed it at the time. And so we met with the specific red team individual. We gave them access into an environment so that they could assume breach, right? And so the intent that we were trying to achieve is that were all the tools, technologies, the people and process actually working in that moment. And so we went through the gamut. About a week later, uh, after we've given access, and I was reviewing with the team, and I said, "Hey, have we heard anything about the red team? Like, are we seeing anything hitting our dashboards? Are we seeing any indicators of compromise?" And they're like, "No, everything is crickets over here." Okay. Um, I thought that was strange because by this point I thought at least we would have seen some indicators of something. And this is where I reached back out to the team lead, and the team lead was like euphoric, I would say. He was so excited. He's like, "Calvin, we've been in the system for a little bit of time now, and I'm just excited to share that we have full compromise of this environment. We have domain admin." And I was like, I was kind of in disbelief, to be honest. In that moment, I was thinking, well, one, we're using some of the best technology. I mean, the the ones that Fortune 500 were using for an EDR, we were using a managed detection and response vendor that was designed for companies like ourselves. And both of those tools and all of the other tools that we had nothing. Everything was green, effectively. And so I said, "Okay, well, show me what you've done." And he walked through the run book that they went through, how they were laterally moving within that environment, and how they evaded the specific tools that we had in place. And so, very truthfully, it was the fact that they had domain admin. They set up their own account, and they could do whatever they wanted at that moment. So of course we stopped the test at that moment, and we started to go through an exercise with the vendors specifically, because One, I was quickly humbled. Okay, we have some of the best tools. So now I'm thinking in my mind, what are the things that might have gone wrong? Like, how did we get to the spot where effectively these tools weren't working the way I thought? So we went through with their engineering teams and validated the configuration because maybe we made a mistake when we set these tools up. Um, we went through each of these, they validated, they said this is all set up to best practices, which was a bit of peace of mind. But on the flip side, I said, well, but how did we get compromised then in this exercise? And so they said, Calvin, we'll have to get back to you. Okay. In that moment, there's two things kind of at play here. One, like, was this going to put us at risk for a new equity partner that was coming to the table through this due diligence? And two, why were these tools not measuring up to my expectations? Because I, you know, arrogantly thought that they were some of the best of the best. And so in that moment, um, we went back out to market. Um, we I would say our industry has so much marketing material out there and ratings and even the analysts that say, hey, these are some of the best tools, but often it's missing the substance, the validation. And that'll be a little bit about what my talk is really about today. It's about figuring out how do you delineate between what is kind of marketing fluff and what's really real. And so when we went back out to market, we looked at a couple different vendors, and we uh, we quickly started to validate those tools, made sure that they were operating. The operating maturity of those tools would meet our needs because we had customers being protected by those specific tools. On the EDR, we had 12,000 systems protected by that. And so in that moment, 90 days later, we came back. We said, we're going to do this red team exercise again. We brought those two incumbents, the MDR and EDR provider, and we said, we're going to do this test again. We hope that you're where you need to be. And when we brought in the new players, um, they failed again, almost identically to the first time. They didn't patch their systems. And this gave me pause because if you think the good guys know how to attack well-known systems, you can sure count on the fact that the nefarious actors, the bad guys, can do just the same. And this was 90 days. In fact, at the time, we had a non-disclosure agreement in place because it was a critical weakness in their software. Both vendors have since patched their systems, so they're not vulnerable to those types of attacks. But the point being is that this really became a pivotal moment in my career of not trust, simply verify. And because of the techniques and the tactics that were being used by those red team actors, um, we could start to look at ways to approach our defenses in a different way. And so, one of the challenges that we overcome in that moment is that, not to skip ahead, but the two new players that we brought to the table. We used an EDR vendor. It's called EPDR, so Endpoint Protection Detection and Response. It uses kind of a zero trust technology where it does a testation on the software stack so that it only allows known good software to run. And so it's always analyzing the software hashes and the behavioral components within an endpoint to make sure that you're not allowing bad software to run. So polymorphic malware can't effectively compromise a machine. The point being is that those techniques that were used on that first red team couldn't compromise that EDR. But we know technology fails. And so in that exact same moment, we said, well, let's assume compromise. Let's assume that endpoint maybe had a software error, didn't run, maybe it was not even installed. So we could allow our MDR team to be in the mix. Within minutes, our SOC team was able to identify exactly what was happening on that, determine that it was malicious, take action, isolate the machine, and take it offline. Now we continue to do this, and in fact, in that exact moment, we tore out the EDR across all of our customers. Now, our customers don't pay for an EDR from the same perspective as they buy a tool; they're buying an outcome, protection on their endpoint. And so we replaced 12,000 endpoints with this other technology, even though it was effectively more money. We saw this as a great way to continue to bolster our cybersecurity posture for all our customers as well as ourselves. Now, fast forwarding to that moment where now it changed my outlook on all the different tools, all the different marketing components. And I know today here I'm here to after that experience of the cyber tools letting me down, I really wanted to talk to you today about how AI is really changing the landscape, both positively and negatively. And I think there is this, I would say, powerful allure to what AI represents. And I think in this utopian vision, the world where AI perfectly protects us, anticipating every cyber threat before it even materializes. And in this vision, AI, of course, is flawless. It's a tireless guardian, providing instant peace of mind. It's fast, smart, adaptive, and really making our jobs easier. Um, but the question we have to ask ourselves is it really too good to be true? And I'm being a little overt with what my language here. Of course, it's not. Um, but what I would say is that these AI-driven tools can start to provide some real actionable protection. Um, but I think for those that are uneducated or don't do a validation, it can also provide a false sense of security. And so when we think about you know the hope, the dream is that it does identify threats faster. It's kind of like this AI generated high tech command center, where everything is streamlined and the systems do all the heavy lifting, and every cybersecurity professional in that room is smiling, which I know those days are few and far between sometimes. um, but it's really that we're trying to guide the outcome, which is to protect the organizations that we're responsible for. But as you kind of you go under the covers, I would say I feel in some cases we're being duped. We're being duped by marketing, and I would say it- they're they're showing up in a different way. And I find that as we continue to educate business owners and leaders, and especially those that this is not their primary craft. You think about the small to medium enterprises of Canada, there's over 130,000 different organizations that are in this bucket. And to be able to provide that trusted advisor to them in a way that helps them make the best possible decision. And I find that the allure sometimes um, can become that thing that can make a poor decision. And so, in practice, these tools are often requiring still constant tweaking, validation, and expertise for them to work effectively. Without that ongoing attention, um, they're just creating some noise and not maybe offering real protection, or giving, worse yet, a false sense of protection. And so, for many businesses, this gap between the hope and reality leaves them vulnerable to threats that they thought they were protected against. So let's dig in a little bit deeper and really kind of understand maybe where some defensive AI is working, offensive AI is working. But before I get into that, I think I just want to zero in on a bit of the evolution of cyber threats, because I think, as technology rapidly changes in our marketplace, and of course, I'm heavily focused on the small to medium enterprises because I think that's a massive opportunity in our market to help elevate the standards that exist within these companies. And so, when I look at the threat landscape, um, I'm sure you've heard many different aspects on this. I'm sure every talk you get another set of lens, but I want to provide that to the small to medium businesses that we see, because it's clear that the cyber threats are not only evolving but doing so at that rapid pace. And we're now facing professional threat actors. We're seeing ransomware organizations and operations, and even state sponsored groups that have significant resources. And so I often will get into a conversation with a customer where they're like, well, like, how do we possibly protect against that? And there is ways to limit the blast areas, the the boom event by making sure that you have the proper protections in place to quickly identify, but more importantly, recover from. And so what we've seen as of late is just the increasing sophistication of phishing attacks. And whether that's deep fakes or even AI generated content, making it harder to distinguish real from fake. Just simply put, we don't have the poor spelling mistakes, the grammar. Now we're having far more persuasive dialogue that are in these emails. Not just using pop culture, but making it look like it's coming from their suppliers or vendors that they work with on a everyday basis. And in some cases, just simply breach that supplier and are using an actual legitimate account to further infiltrate those in the chain. And so those supply chain attacks are always on the rise, targeting the vulnerabilities in people and the software that they have. And so, what I think is worth noting is as we've advanced in this space and we've seen software as a service grow to new heights, um, the amount of attacks that we're now seeing that are not on premise, it's on cloud environments. In fact, the stat that I have is 16 to 1, which is a completely different shift when you think about going back 15 years ago, where it was the inverse of that, just simply because there wasn't as much data up into the cloud. Further to that, what we see is that um, ransomware attacks from 22 to 23 went up 64%. Criminals increasing their double extortion tactics, so effectively taking the data out of the organization and then ransoming it outside the organization. We're seeing that the cloud, of course, increasing, as I indicated before, 78% of all attacks, 23, targeting cloud resources or software as a service vendors. Um, and then we're also now seeing that the identity-based attacks are on the rise as well. In fact, I would say that is the most predominant attack that we're seeing in terms of the small to medium business is that we serve. And so, in our own statistics through our SOC, we see about 10,000 brute force attempts daily, and that's across specifically about 2,500 unique accounts. And now because we service, about 50,000 users, it's one fifth of the each attempt that we're seeing. So this is becoming more and more the change of the times. So let's be honest. There's a lot of complexity in the threat environment. There's all these different types of attack vectors. Um, with password attacks increasing tenfold, uh, this is where we see people are trying to find new ways to exploit credentials. And when you couple that with the fact that only about 35% of organizations have MFA, there's a lot of work that we need to do. Um, I think Microsoft released a stat that says they're seeing 4,000 attacks per second on identities alone, per second. And in just 1 month, 450,000 instances of potential data exfiltration for organizations. That's a massive stat. And so when you start thinking about all the different areas that an organization can have, and especially those that are a little bit more sophisticated and complex, um, we're seeing different ways that these threats need to be covered. I think threat actors are really going to the path of least resistance. They're going to the user, simply a login instead of hacking in. That's the term we use. And so when we think about all these other areas that we need to defend against, this is where we need to have a different defensive strategy, really adding layers of uh, of of defense in order to protect against these sophisticated attacks. And especially for the small to medium enterprises, navigating this environment can feel really overwhelming. And especially without sufficient resources or expertise, they can find themselves vulnerable across multiple fronts. In fact, often we bring in new customers simply because either their current IT provider or IT individual let them down. And in some cases, it's just not their fault. It's just they didn't have the awareness that they had risk. And so ultimately, I think the message is clear. As the threat landscapes evolving rapidly, we need to lean into people, process, and technology to be able to protect against these types of vulnerabilities. And so this is really about maintaining comprehensive defenses. Okay, so with that being said, I want to kind of pivot here. When we think about defensive AI, the promise or potential that it has, we use it in different ways within our own organization to be able to rapidly respond. And I think, this is what I would highlight as some of the different areas that we're seeing some success with. And so um, defensive AI kind of brings a lot of promise to some critical areas. It's all about the speed of detection of threats. I think the average is anywhere from 120 to 180 days to detect when an attack actually happens in some of these more sophisticated attacks. And so being able to bring that down to, even days, let alone maybe minutes or hours, would be a tremendous difference in changing the game. So we can also think about how do we get to some of the different network protections and anti-phishing measures, where AI helps identify malicious attempts by recognizing those patterns that humans might miss. Um, Perhaps even ripping the emails out of inboxes, so you don't have a multiple blast area of individuals clicking on malicious emails. And then looking at that dependable authentication and behavioral analysis that allows us to detect those anomalies where people are showing up where they shouldn't be, or maybe going outside of the bounds of what um, an organization would allow their employees to travel to. As simple as, I'm not going to allow my employees to travel to the U.S. without an authorization to allow for that event to occur. But it's really making sure that we lean into some of these capabilities and have the systems to restrict and limit the access that we have within these business environments. One of the things that I am starting to see, which is really a benefit, is as we continue to educate new cybersecurity professionals in this field, is being able to get them up to speed as quickly as possible. And this is where I'm starting to see some really great movement around AI-driven measures to defend against the identification of security events. Even in some cases, prompt generating LMMs um, to help guide security analysts during the incident response process. So just really guiding them to the answer quickly. And so this really is about boosting the capability within a SOC as an example. Next, I'd want to just drive into kind of the promise and potential. And I think this table represents a little bit about the potential impact of AI across a number of different stages. This was a SANS security incident response survey that came out, and this was really around where we are today and where we could see it in the future. But really, AI enhancing the ability to do that identification as one of those core components for threat hunting, being able to analyze a tremendous amount of data to distill it into something that can be actionable. But I would say that this leaves a lot to be desired. There's a lot more core components that need to change. And so while AI is transformative, particularly in that detection and analysis spot, we still have to rely on human expertise to complete incident management. Like, there's not an AI that's going to do that whole thing for you today, maybe in the future. Um, but the balance of that automation and that human insight is critical to that robust cybersecurity approach. So let's pivot here. Offensive AI, the weaponization of what we see happening, and just as many as we see the defensive AI or defensive community working on the blue teaming and helping fortify the businesses that we protect, we are actively seeing them being used offensively. And so whether that's a white hat hacker or really a black hat hacker using some of these, and this is this is a complex map that represents how cybercriminals could use AI offensively across different stages of the MITRE attack framework. Everything from reconnaissance and social engineering to credential theft and lateral movement within systems. Offensive AI enables attackers to automate and adapt tactics at a far different level. It actually, I would say, unprecedented. For example, social engineering can now incorporate AI-driven deepfakes. In fact, I was at Black Hat earlier this year, and they had this incredible social engineering test where they had human-led social engineers against an AI-driven social engineer, and the AI was at par in that moment, at par with some of the most advanced social engineering tactics. But it was making jokes on the fly. It was adapting its script in real time to this target. And I was just thinking, this is the moment we're in, this inflection point where, in the wrong hands, you would be able to get the information that you need. You can be able to even potentially get the credentials to now be able to pivot into organizations, and to do that at speed and scale like we've never seen before. And I feel like we're behind the mark on this. So that all being said, attackers are using automation to speed up that reconnaissance, probe defenses, and even coordinate attacks across multiple attack vectors, making effectively the penetration into operations faster and harder to detect. And this is where we start to see that double-edged sword of AI. For every advance we make defensively, actually, I feel is matched, if not countered, by cyber criminals wielding AI in malicious ways. So here's where we're at. It's not so unique challenges for businesses. We have data worth stealing. We have data worth ransoming. We have money to steal. Traditional security not working. Billions of passwords being stolen. People may be the weakest link. Of course, IoT is increasing exposure. Customers are asking about security. Bad news traveling fast. The market is judging us. Investors are demanding answers. And we have regulators that are scrutinizing us. Sometimes it feels like we're losing the fight. So where do we go from here? Because there's got to be answers, right? Well, before I get to that, I want to talk about this bridge. This is the Chocolata Bridge. It's a suspension bridge that was located in Honduras and originally constructed in 1930. This bridge was rebuilt in 1996. And the Honduras government, knowing that this bridge is a key component to ensuring that you have people that cross this river, was likely going to face some extreme weather conditions. So it commissioned some of the brightest architectural minds in the world to build a bridge that could withstand any hurricane. It was state of the art at the time. In fact, it was rounded as one of the core components of the city. Sure enough, in 1998, Honduras was hit by Hurricane Mitch, a Category 5 storm that devastated the Caribbean, and Honduras was wrecked. Roads were wiped out. There was considerable damage to buildings, and every other bridge in Honduras was destroyed. Now, the Chocolata Bridge stood its ground and survived in near perfect condition. Okay, well, amazingly, it did. But here's the challenge. The storm caused the river to carve a whole completely new path. It no longer ran under the bridge. In fact, it barely spanned that sandbar that you see there, rendering it effectively useless. And I think this is a great analogy for having a dynamic approach to security. The bridge, security has to change. It has to adapt, and having that balance of security to enable productivity with an ever-changing, evolving threat landscape. And so, AI and machine learning is effectively worthless if all you have in your environment is local admins and you're not patching or have multi-factor authentication. And so often we get maybe thinking around, hey, we got to solve like 90% of the bottom attack vectors before we start focusing on the top 10%. So where do we go from here? Well, here's a here's a small sliver of some of the vendors that are here to help, all the different cybersecurity components that exist. I'm sure you've seen this before. And the point that I make here is that there's a lot, and this is just some of them, a lot of different logos, and they're all trying to help solve the cybersecurity challenges that we have within the market today. And I think this is where some of the allure of cyber tools come in. Um, let's kind of start with that. As you can see here, there's many tools that have sleek, visually engaging dashboards that seem to offer, one-stop solution for monitoring, protecting networks. And there's a visual appeal that can be tempting, giving you a sense of control and security. And I would say, as future cybersecurity professionals, it's critical to go beyond the surface. And these dashboards may look impressive, but true security relies on understanding what's happening underneath, knowing how to configure, maintain, and validate these tools will be essential in your roles. In fact, part of your job might involve managing these systems and knowing how they function and where they fall short. It'll be critical to be using them effectively. Because remember, a well-designed interface doesn't necessarily mean the tool is foolproof or even comprehensive. And so, this brings me to a critical point, the risk associated with tools. There's a common temptation to, simply adopt it, set it and forget it. And of course, in cybersecurity, there's no tool where you can set it and forget it. It's about managing it. And I think that mess of cables behind you is like, there's always something else to be done within an organization. It's about prioritizing what's important and ensuring that you're starting to go through a systematic process to do just that. And I think as I'm coming up for time, there's a couple things I want to leave you with. One, AI and human error can create a dangerous combination. And I'm not here to just really poke onto the AI. I think there's many great technologies that exist to help elevate this. But I think people are still the weakest link in security. And we have statistics that back this up. 96% of breaches involve some degree of human error, whether it's falling for phishing attacks, using weak passwords, or possibly even neglecting security protocols. So for people entering this field in cybersecurity, it's really a reminder that cybersecurity is not just about technology, it's about people. Even with the best tools, if human behaviors and awareness aren't managed, vulnerabilities will persist. And early in your careers, you might be tasked with maybe conducting phishing simulations, training users, or monitoring for behavioral anomalies and configurations. This isn't just busy work; it's foundational to creating a secure environment. Developing people skills along with technical expertise is essential if you want to reduce these risks effectively. So, what I propose is that you need some strategies for continuous validation. It's so vital to know where you're at. And I always think about cybersecurity professionals or leaders in this field is there's kind of three categories. You know, what you don't know, and what you don't know you don't know. I know that's kind of a mouthful, but I think what's important here is that getting visibility. It illustrates the unknowns in security. These are the things that you want to uncover. And so on the right, you can see a structured approach. Discover, validate, prioritize, optimize. It's not just a one-time process; it's a continuous cycle, because it's not over after you've done the task. It has to be repeated each and every time. And so at F12 internal for our own internal cybersecurity practice, we have a weekly meeting amongst a number of meetings, but specifically where we're doing that continuous validation. We're measuring each area. We're up to a point where now we're doing weekly penetration tests. We're going through and doing security validations on configurations, ensuring that vulnerability management is in check. We're doing validations against our perimeter, our internal. We're assuming compromises at every different layer of our segmented, micro-segmented network, and seeing where are those pivot attacks happening. I would say we're probably more sophisticated than most. And so, but not letting my ego get the best of me this time. It's about making sure that you start with the why. What's important to the organization? And this is really comes down to the mission critical assets. What is that for that organization? It could be intellectual property, it could be PII information, it could be customer lists or anything in between. The point is that you want to start to build layers of security, defense in depth, as we call it. And I think this is an important aspect of not just doing one element. It's about creating a comprehensive cybersecurity practice within an organization to help constantly test and adapt to the changing needs of the business. Oh, I missed a slide. Sorry about that. And so, kind of getting into building that resilience across those tools, it's really about thinking through where it's not just a team doing it, but aligning to management, aligning to leadership so that it's not just one member of the team. It's about building capability that actually creates a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Because it's not just another tool, it's not another individual in some cases. It's about being different and knowing that if you're going to be given data from suppliers or customers, that you take that to heart. And so building defenses so that you can see what is happening, where that data lies, and how are you blocking those attacks, detecting them, and continuing on building that resilience across the different tools and processes that need to exist. So as I wrap up here, in closing, I want to leave you with this thought. Cybersecurity isn't just a job. In my mind, it's a responsibility. As future cybersecurity professionals, you'll be the guardians of information, the protectors of businesses, and ultimately safeguard people's livelihoods. And this is what gets me incredibly passionate about this craft that we do today. The businesses that we protect aren't just corporate entities. I know that maybe on the shell, the surface, that's what they are, but they're the means through which thousands of people provide for their families. They support their communities and build their lives around. A data breach or a cyber attack isn't just a technical problem or a security incident. Has real consequences that can ripple out to affect employees, their families, and even their futures. And so what we do in cybersecurity matters deeply. And in my view, it's our duty to stay vigilant, to push beyond what's easy, and to constantly adapt to protect those who rely on us. It's a challenging path. And the quote here really is, if it's worth doing, it never is easy. And so as you embark on this journey, remember the weight and the purpose behind your work. You're here not only to defend systems, but to protect livelihoods. This is the responsibility, in fact, the privilege in my view, that comes with being a cybersecurity professional. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to any of the questions that you may have.
Thank you, Calvin, for sharing your thoughts. It was really wonderful. I'm opening for the questions. Anyone, you can raise your hands. All right. Okay. Juneta, can you please unmute yourself?
Got a couple of hands, but
Yeah. Just give me a moment.
While we're waiting for the mics to get fixed so they can speak, I see Sean Belcourt's asking you, says, Calvin, thank you for a great seminar that was truly on point, especially regarding our responsibilities and as cybersecurity professionals. So yeah, that's nice acknowledgement there.
Thanks. I hope I wasn't too preachy. I had some passion for it, but I know sometimes it's just getting a paycheck is worth it. But I really do believe that we have to elevate the standard in this profession. And so, give me a spot to talk on. I'm going to do it.
No, I like the passion that you showed there, and it's an extremely interesting talk. So one question, you were mentioning that when you were at Black Hat and about AI, and they were showing social engineering and AI. Were there other areas at Black Hat when you were there with the AI that caught your interest?
I think one of the core, of course, there's like for every offensive action, there's a defensive action. And one of the defensive actions that I thought was really interested was just around the ability to take phishing data, like at a very macro level. And Microsoft's been doing a good job. I know KnowBe4 has put in some new products to do some additional analysis. And the importance of being able to seek when a malicious thing is happening and then be able to take that out of the entire community. So not just one organization benefits from that. You have a whole community cohort that can benefit from these macro actions. And so, just in our organization alone, if I were to share, we had 850 unique phishing attacks that impacted our customers over this year alone. And through that, whether they got in an inch or a mile into organizations that didn't have the adequate protections, we were there to respond. And the challenge is that often these organizations just simply haven't elevated their cybersecurity posture to a level that can either provide the awareness to the employees, as simple as that might look, or to having the technology to even block said attacks. And so there's a lot more that we can be doing, which is exciting because it creates so much opportunity for conversations and building relationships.
Excellent, thank you. Is any other speakers ready to ask? I think the microphones are open now.
Yeah, microphones are open. Can anyone please try to unmute themselves?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Calvin. Thanks for the presentation. So I have two questions here, if you don't mind. So first question I have is that, F12 is, from my understanding, is a IT service provider, right? And one thing I noticed from IT service provider is that usually a big problem that we face is that businesses, they tend to cut costs on IT during lean time. Like it's usually the first thing they would consider to be cutting. So my question to you is that, how do we continue to provide cybersecurity services and keep people safe during like the lean time, during like when companies need to be cutting costs and without compromising on the quality of the service?
Yeah, there's a couple different approaches here, but just to maybe keep it on point, what I would say is don't make it optional. Remove the choice. Don't allow the ability to have MFA to be a choice from the customer. It's something that we did with our solutions long ago, is simply not allowing that to be an element you compromise on. And that means pushing back. And as a service provider, you can choose whether or not that is a client that you keep.
Right.
And simply put, having the courage to do just that, to say, I won't compromise on your security because I know it will happen. You'll blame me for not keeping this front of mind, because they don't know any better. They're just saying, hey, I'm going to push you and say, I want you to come up with creative ways to, cut the cost. But what are those things that are the non-negotiables, the things that you won't compromise on? And I think having that in your mind to say, these are the things that we know are going to protect you from the threats out there that we will not compromise on.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So the question I have is related more to the field of machine learning and AI. So we talk about how attackers, they can use these AI models to model their attacks, right? But my question is that how do we protect these AI models against like the attackers themselves? Because like I've been reading some literatures on it, and I know that there are certain attacks as possible against like different neural networks or against like LLM models. So I'm just curious, like, what have you seen about like protecting these machine learning models against these attack types? So
yeah, so what we have seen is that there's a moral compass that we see in some of the main players, right? Like you see through Meta, through Google, through OpenAI, and they're specifically putting some controls in there.
right.
Here's the challenge, though. Those are the well-known ones, and maybe someone not educated using those for cybersecurity offensive tactics would be thwarted. Here's the reality. There's a number of LLMs and LLMs that you can use and customize to use it for overt practices. I can literally go on the internet right now and do just that. And so the challenge is that the cat's already out of the bag. And so it's not about preventing the capabilities from these LLM. It's actually about just defending against the types of attacks at a much different velocity than we've ever seen before. And so I don't think we can put the cat back in the bag, as it were. It's out. We have to now just rise up to have a different level of care to defend against these types of attacks at a much greater velocity. One of the things that I saw is around the ability to create vulnerabilities off of 0-day attacks, which I've never, like, they can do it same day. You can plug in the vulnerability model into an LLM and it will create the specific attack vector to take that vulnerability and then have a payload to distribute across it. So the fact that now we have to get into management of 0 days at a much greater pace, like we cannot wait weeks. We have to take action in the moment. And so it's becoming more and more apparent that our speed to respond is at the highest level it's ever been. And so, yeah, it's not about the defense now. It's about the direct action and response.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions.
Anyone? Strange. Okay, Sally, please go on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay. So hi, my name is Selena. I'm originally a little bit of a different background. I come from an accounting by trade, and then I am a self-taught software developer.
Awesome.
I'm curious about going into learning more about cybersecurity, but I'm just kind of lost between I'm taking a certification right now. I'm looking at a master's degree as well, and I feel like things are moving so fast. So how do you keep yourself informed? Because you're working a full-time job, like you're in that right now. But for
Yeah.
someone who's breaking into this, are we taking certificates consistently, like every month to try and keep up, or is it just reading more online? Or how do you recommend we stay involved in this community to
Ooh.
grow?
Well, I would say you want to delve into the area that you have the most passion for or the most interest for. And the thing that will get you excited to read the content. And I think part of just exploring any new topic is what's interesting. How do you keep up with it? And I often find that lives will change, right? And I have four boys, young boys at home, and so I just know sometimes I just don't have the time. But when I do get the time, one, I think my feed already force feeds a lot of information to me directly, and so reading up on it's one aspect. I think practicing is the other aspect, and I think depending on what you have interest in, whether that's maybe going down and just figuring out more about how to defend against it, or actually doing the practice of defensive blue teaming or even red teaming. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at. Is test your skills. There's a lot of free components, learning components out there. Pay what you can. I know Black Hills Information Security is a great one that gives you capture the flag capabilities, and so you can start to iterate through knowledge and test your knowledge to see maybe where you have gaps, and then you can go and read up on how that exists. And so because there's so many different areas within AI and creating, like secure by design from a developer perspective of what you can lean into to think how an offensive actor could maybe take your code and dissect it and use vulnerabilities in it. And I think there's some great technology that you can use today, and even our internal DevOps team uses it as well, is to be able to rapidly test your code against AI. I would be cautious. Don't put your code into public LMMs if you don't want that to be public knowledge, simply because we've seen examples of that with organizations putting intellectual property into the LLMs and trying to iterate. So, but a GPT can do a really cool thing where you can take your code and say, okay, what are all the vulnerabilities in there? How can I make this more secure? And there's certainly ones like Visual Studio has some AI co-pilot capabilities that you can use in a more protected environment if you pay for it. But anyways, I hope I probably give you a lot of broad spectrum there, and I hope something landed. So
That's great. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
And thank you for this presentation. It was very interesting.
Any more questions? We are open for one more question.
I'll take as many. I don't have a hard stop, but I know everyone else does. Don't be afraid.
Sorry, if no one has a question, is it okay if I ask another one?
Yes, please go on.
Yeah. So another thing that I was just thinking of is that recently we had that incident with CrowdStrike where literally there was a loss of billions of dollars in business revenue due to the CrowdStrike incident, right? So I'm just curious, is that how do we determine the risk of the risk trade-off between having an actual cyber attack and just the security tools that causing a false attack to be happening, or like a false positive?
Yeah, well, how would I answer that? One, I think there's going to be software bugs, and the severity of those software bugs. Obviously, CrowdStrike was a massive one, had a massive impact across the industry. I think in that scenario, there was some new opportunities for them to change how they deliver updates across their ecosystem of products. And I know even after that event, we went through a number of our vendors to say, what is your quality control measures? How do you, push that out in maybe a ringed format, so you have early testers, beta testers, general availability, so you can really ensure that you're not creating widespread issues. Thankfully, all of our vendors were doing it in that form. So I think that shouldn't, the fear of that happening shouldn't be the reason why you don't put in the right tool. I think the continuous validation, ensuring that you're going through those vendor questionnaires and validating how are they doing, how are they conducting themselves. And I think that's something that's not being done widely in the marketplace. It's something that we do is we go through and validate a vendor security validation where they have to prove to us that they're measuring up to their cybersecurity components, but then how do they actually execute against patch management? How do they protect against a 0-day? How do they respond when they discover a 0-day and they have to rapidly develop something to protect against that? Those are all questions that should be asked. And I think that goes back to part of my conversation around that continuous validation, because just simply trusting it for what it is on face value isn't enough. You have to validate, you have to ask the right questions. And when it's the wrong solution, because they've said maybe it doesn't measure up and they're not willing to change, that you have the courage to change that tool or that vendor. And it takes some sort of courage to do some of those activities. And even the big players do fall, and CrowdStrike was an example of that this year. I'm sure there'll be someone next year, but yeah. And it's not great. It's not a bad tool. I just think they made a poor decision on the architecture of their patch management. So.
Yeah, it just seems like they didn't QA it properly, but I know that it was for like a 0-day attack, so they wanted to push it out as quick as they can. So yeah. That's the thing I was curious about, is that trade-off between addressing zero-day attack as quickly as possible and QAing to make sure that it runs properly, you know?
Yeah, so one, you're being force-fed an update is one aspect, right? Or two is, how do you maybe have some control and isolate said system? Because often what we find is if it's an external vulnerability that has externally accessible access into an environment, well, those are the worst. So you may have to just take off your service. You may take down your website or your place of commerce in order to protect against that until it's adequately patched. When you're internal in the environment, you can maybe make some different decisions on a risk-based approach to say, okay, with the likelihood of this actually impacting, and I know there's like EPSS scores and CVSS scores that you can start to weight on, and then based on the organizational's policy, you can make a decision on that. And so, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's one paintbrush that can do it each and every time. I think you have to take a measured approach to that risk based on the level of exposure that you may have. And so, but that has to be done in a rapid format. And I think doing it with eyes wide open is an important aspect. And I don't think there's a perfect answer here, unfortunately, but I think it's having a measured approach to it.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Calvin, for sharing your valuable insight with us. And thank you all the attendees to join us today. I hope everyone has filled the forms, and keep an eye for next month's announcement. And thank you. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks very much, Calvin. Have a great day. And it was a great talk.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Yep. How can I help you?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get the form.
I have shared the link here in the chat. Can you please check? I'll share the link again.
Yeah, if it came in later, after that point, you have to reshare the link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anybody who comes after the time that you put it in, it's not available to them.
Please check.
Yeah.
And you have to have been in the session for more than 30 minutes for me to send it.
No, I've been here. I just didn't see the link.
Okay.
No.
Well, yeah, I'll see that when I look at who's attending and whatnot.
All right.
If you signed in with your student email, Joseph.
Yes, I did.
I don't need to fill the link in because I automatically know which students sign in with their student email.
Oh, okay.
And that automatically goes up to them.
Okay, that's great then.
Okay.
Yeah, good. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Okay.